Special Agent of the Interior, Lamina Duvari, was having a good day. There was no reason she shouldn't be. She was at the peak of performance for her rank. Her fitness reports were a model for others. Sharp, experienced, and well honed in her craft, she was the Empress's net, catching the Empire's enemies and pulling them in to face the justice they deserved. She was everything that an agent of the Interior should be, and as first daughter and heir of the House of Duvari, that was the only acceptable answer. Less than perfect was not an option that her mother ever indulged in her children. As she became an adult, it was not an option she'd indulged in herself. If that austere dedication had made enemies of other nobles, then those nobles should learn to wallow less in corruption. If Lamina had not only survived but thrived, it was because she was too damn good at her work for anything less. That drive had been installed from her earliest memories, and she'd applied it to every skill and problem. She wasn't unrealistic about the shortcomings of others, but the failures of others were not her problem, unless it impacted her mission. She knew who and what she wanted to be, and her recent triumph shutting down the crime ring lurking in the Yoshino asteroid belt had been complete and total. A summons to headquarters wasn't a new experience, and after her recent success, she entered the office of Minister Ray Lin with certain expectations. Lamina had climbed the ladder of success with an unmatched tenacity, and as she stood before the minister's desk, she braced to attention and awaited her pleasure. Days like this, with the promise of the next mission, the new hunt, were what Lamina lived for. In an organization where everyone had a mission to achieve or a personal agenda, Minister Ray Lin of the Interior was well known as one scary bitch, but at least the minister never kept her waiting. Today was no exception. Special Agent Duvari, at ease. The old woman closed out the files on her screen and stood up, nodding affably. Please take a seat. I've just been reviewing your work clearing out that pirate gang. That was well done. A shame we couldn't have taken a few more of them alive, but that sends a message all its own, doesn't it? Lamina moved to the offered seat without preamble, and waited patiently as the minister moved around to join her, settling into the chair with an athletic grace that belied her years. Thus far it seemed to be a promising start, and Lamina didn't mind the minister reviewing her last case. Certainly the casualties hadn't been her fault, though she had no compunctions about getting blood on her hands. As much as was needed to get the job done, and no more, she did what was needed without uncertainty. Decisive action solved problems. Showing hesitation with scum like the Yoshino gang only opened the door to more violence before surrender. There was no room for weakness in her work, and she had no mercy to give. Yes, ma'am. Despite casting a powerful shadow, Lamina wasn't intimidated by Ray Lin. This was the 5th time in 8 years she'd been summoned to this office, and Ray Lin had always been polite but to the point. The attitude made Lamina respect the minister, and if those visits had always produced opportunities and advancement, she'd earned all of them. Your clearance, it's level Violet 5, I see. At her nod, the minister gazed at her for a moment. This mission, if you choose to accept it, after this morning your clearance will be Violet 3. Need to know for mission parameters only. The minister knows I've never been offered a mission I didn't accept, Lamina replied, but if it were possible to sit any straighter in the chair, she would have. A climbing clearance to Violet 3 was exceptional, even if it only involved the scope of the mission. The rumour was the minister herself was Violet 2. Lamina nodded her acceptance slowly, but felt her heart race in anticipation at the opportunity opening before her. Very well. Minister Ray Lin drew the words out, as if she were realigning her thoughts, though the woman had a reputation for thinking 5 steps ahead. You'll be taking point as the officer in charge, though you're going to be strictly undercover. 6 teams of Death Head commandos have already been placed in situ. 3 are already embedded to provide you with striker response capabilities, and they've planted a comprehensive suite of surveillance assets. The other 3 teams will be on watch around the clock. They don't know the full reason for the mission, but their briefing was complete enough to make them fully effective. Once you assume cover, you are not to break it. But there's negligible chance of communications interception, so your encrypted omnipad should be sufficient for working with your team. Once the objective enters, you and your team are on your own. Do not let things get out of control. I cannot emphasize that strongly enough, Davari. Am I absolutely clear? Yes, Minister, replied Lamanna, nodding gravely as she considered the impressive assets being placed at her disposal. It had been a while since her last covert assassination, but it had been a clean job. The reactor meltdown had been an unintended consequence, and she had been entirely cleared by the review board. All the same, it had been a while since Command handed her a mission so hands-on. All right, then. Raylan pulled out her omnipad and nodded for Lavanna to do the same, before swiping a file over. Read that. I'm getting a cup of hot ale, and we can talk it over once you finish. Once you leave this office, anything on that file beyond the mission outline and contacts does not exist. I'm going to be a music teacher. Lamanna very definitely kept any hint of disbelief out of her voice, making a statement rather than asking a question. Yes, nodded Raylin with a certain lassitude. Your predecessor in the operation wasn't coping very well, and we had to retire her from the field. When your background came up in a data search, you became our ideal candidate. You mean my background in music theory and composition? Lamanna had taken to music during her years at university, and given herself over to it with a passion, excelling in the subject as much as she had in economics. The double major impressed her mother as much as it had the recruiter for the interior. In truth, the work with music had been relaxing and enjoyable. Had she lived a different life, it might have been the road she travelled. Exactly. I know you prefer field work, but you're going to have to put that aside. Raylin set her cup down on the table and looked back contemplatively. Guarding the Empire in the House of Tasu has always been the Interior's first calling. When Empress Callista died 3 years ago, the transition to her heir was seamless, but altering the line of succession shuffled our priorities. The princess is still very young, and the only real future for her is a political marriage. Regardless, she is the third daughter of the Empress, and while she isn't the chosen heir, it looks vastly different on paper. Putting additional security on her is our sacred charge. Of course, Minister. The monarch couldn't argue with that, and didn't even try, yet it felt like she was missing pieces of the situation. Why not just withdraw her from the school, give her a private education at the palace, and avoid all of this? Well, for a start, the Empress doesn't want it, and what she wants she is damn well going to get, said the minister flatly, before turning over her hand with an airy gesture. Mind you, I don't think she's wrong either. The Academy offers an education that's second to none. It's close to the palace grounds, and pulling her from the class when she's expected there for her second year might raise inquiries. Probably not, I'll grant you, but she's made friends, and they're all nobility. They talk, and right now no one is asking inconvenient questions. But none of them know who she actually is. Could it be so bad? Well, yes and no. The princess has been attending under an assumed name, posing as the 6th daughter of one of the Empress's retainers, and it gives the girl something of a normal life. Even at the palace there'd be predators at the door, and this way she's out of sight and out of mind. It's also better for her in the long run when she's married off. She'll have the exposure she needs to move comfortably in society, and the false background is quite secure. The minister settled back in her chair. By all accounts, the princess is quite smart, and knows better than to break her cover. Can you imagine how many absolute bitches you'll have cozying up to her, if her classmates even suspect it? Lamanna allowed memories of her school years to cross her mind for a second. While elements of the time had been enjoyable, her reputation as a daughter of House Duvari sometimes made dealing with her classmates feel like a swim through the sea of souls with diving weights on. It had been a pointless, stupid, and frustrating excursion into petty infighting, and at the time she suspected that's what being 12 was for. Now she was just reaching middle age. She knew it for the training ground it was, but at least adults gained a sense of finesse. Her school years had been a time she'd not wished on anyone, and her mother hadn't needed to prompt. She joined the interior the day after graduation, and hadn't looked back. "So we're sure that I'm the only one who knows the princess's, my objectives, identity?" she asked. "Entirely," nodded the minister. "Oh, the head administrator knows that a royal is attending the school, but has no idea which one of her students it is. She thinks it's a distant relation, but it's hardly the first time the academy has taught royalty. Telling her that fiction allowed us to plant full death's head teams on the custodial staff, instead of trying to get them hired on. We were also able to open up the old surveillance barracks without awkward questions. It's tucked out in the campus woodlands, so you have 3 reaction teams on rotation, and 3 teams able to watch the classrooms, common rooms, and the perimeter, even the coast. Once your objective is dropped off on preterm day, a screed won't fly on the grounds without you knowing about it." Lamanna nodded at that, satisfied. She had already risen higher and faster than most agents ever dreamed of, but she had her sights set higher still. She couldn't argue with the importance of the mission. Even if she felt regrets being out of the field for 3 years, pulling off this sort of detail got you mentioned to the Empress herself. Completing the assignment could see her promoted directly to the interior staff. Provided everything went right, her future was made. "You can count on me, Minister Aylin. Nothing will go wrong." Yes, Lavanna thought. This was definitely a good day. As he cleaned up from breakfast, Tom considered the little package on his kitchen counter. He was still trying to decide when the best time would be to give it to Mivere. Certainly they'd become intimate, and while relationships between faculty members weren't discouraged, they both fully agreed on the need to establish his reputation as a professional. That would give him the basic credibility a Shivanti professor didn't need to work for, but which they reluctantly agreed he might need to achieve. "Not a first," he sighed, settling over his dinner. "Just the newest." Regardless, Tom was in a good mood. Preterm had kept everyone busy, but he gained a real sense of what his work was going to be, and he was eager. As for the shell, Mivere had promised to take him off campus to see some of the sights during vacation. She came over now and then for dinner. Well, that was the one idea for giving her the bikini. Tom smiled as he picked up his omnipad and headed out the door. This was going to be a good day.